So back pain, it's complicated, right? It's a billion-dollar industry. So back pain can come from a lot of different causes, mechanically, also psychologically. When we'll do a video at another time when we talk about the psychology of pain, and that pain is an emotion. And a lot of times when people are stressed or depressed, that can start to manifest itself as aches and pains, but that's a different story. We're just going to talk about strictly the mechanical aspect right now. So a couple things that we look at with our tests, right? When standing lumbo-pelvic flexion or that toe touch test is limited, those people tend to have more low back pain with pulling, especially at high volume or anything where they're pulling and they're under fatigue. These people are more likely to lose that nice rigid and neutral lumbar spine. They'll tend to go into that flex position, but also be out of control with that flex position. Pulling with a rounded spine can be okay, but when you're doing it often and under fatigue, you lose that motor control and it's not good. When you start to see that hip flexion, people are missing that hip flexion. These people will tend to get low back pain with squatting. Again, they'll tend to round again too quickly. It's not about the back rounding, it's being out of control with the back rounding. Another thing that we'll see is when people are missing that hip extension. So in that lunge test, they're missing hip extension. So what they'll end up doing is they'll find the extension by extending their back. So kipping and running activities will really start to exacerbate that low back pain, and that'll really start to get hot right at the bottom. So regarding the mobility screen, this is what we tend to see leading towards that back pain. So when you start to evaluate your athletes, start to keep that in mind as part of some root causes. Again, always look at everything. We're just trying to give you some of the other stuff. Now, as far as when it comes to strength training, we also start to see a difference between strength and stamina. So oftentimes we'll see guys with 500 or a 400 pound deadlift, and their back will absolutely blow up when they do Diane, and when it shouldn't, right? It's a relatively low percentage for them to be doing, but what we find is that we have a test for this that we'll go over, is that when we look at their absolute strength, if you think of it like a pyramid, the absolute strength is the vertical distance from the base to the peak, right? And their endurance being the width of the base, that they have a very narrow width and a very high peak, very high absolute strength, but poor endurance. So when they get into moving through something like Diane, where it's a lot of reps, relatively low weight, but they start to lose motor control and their back starts to really pump up and starts to fatigue and can cause pain and injury in that instance. The last thing is how people move, right? Not only are they flexing, are they extending, how it looks to you as the coach, but also the tempo of how they're moving. The people that tend to crash down at the bottom of the squat and really grind their way up on a lot of reps, those are the people that tend to feel more low back pain, and simply getting them to keep a slower down, faster of tempo has been really, really palliative for those people. It really makes them own the movement. It makes them have a lot more motor control, lets their body learn more motor control and where the best fit positions for their joints are. So again, when you're dealing with low back pain, it is very complicated. It's a $1 billion question. It's figuring it out for everybody. But these are some things that you guys can start to look at with the mobility screen, and like we said, with the strength, balance stuff and stuff that we'll go over more in the future. So how the tempo of their movement, and also their strength versus their stamina.